Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 4 of Lucifer. Really quickly, I'm going to start off with talking about non-spoilers like I usually do. I'll give you a clear cutoff point before I go into full spoilers about everything. So, in general, how did I feel about this season? I thought it was great. I think they did a lot of interesting things like that I kind of wasn't expecting. Like, the story took some very interesting turns, but I think, you know, if you were a fan of the 3 previous seasons, I think you're really going to like what they did with this season. They introduced a lot of interesting things that obviously I'll talk about more when we go into the spoilers and stuff like that, but it's stuff that I'm interested to see, like, going forward. Would that be something they potentially, like, play around with more? Like I said, some of the stuff they introduced this season, but a lot of the character development in the season was really, really good, and I just, like, you know, I feel like, I know, like I said, I'll elaborate on this more in the spoilers, but I think this is like the biggest identity crisis Lucifer has ever had over the course of this series, and it's an identity crisis you can understand, you know, and you know he's always had a bit of an identity crisis, but I feel like this is the worst it's ever been. So I liked how they tackled that this season, and just, you know, aspects of, you know, the complicated relationship he finds himself in this season, or rather relationships. It's a whole thing, but I like just a lot of the dynamics in this season. So if you have not seen if you have not seen season 4 yet, and just like I said, you should check it out. It is great. So just know that going forward, I will be officially going into spoilers. So do keep that in mind. You have been warned. Okay, so there is a lot to break down about this season. The whole Lucifer and Chloe situation did not play out the way I thought it would. There was literally like 2 or 3 episodes before Eve actually showed up. I thought that was kind of fascinating. I thought we'd gotten her like kind of decently early in the season, because it turns out like it's been like basically a month since season 3's finale, and Chloe basically just up and left after everything, which was kind of interesting. I didn't realize that was going to be. I thought like, oh, like Chloe kept her distance and stuff like that, and because of that Lucifer spiral, it's like, no, he was okay kind of a little bit, but it took, you know, Chloe coming back and her pretending like everything's okay and everything before it was like, oh no, there's definitely something up here. Especially that first instance of, because it seemed like, oh, because even Lucifer's walking up to her where she's interrogating, like a, you know, asking questions to a witness or something. He's just staring at her, and she's like, excuse me. She's like, are you okay? She's like, yeah, I'm fine. It's like, yeah, I got, you know, but it's like, hey, you know, went all over Europe with, you know, with Trixie and stuff, but we're back and everything. I'm like, huh. But the moment was when Lucifer was about to touch her, she jumped and was scared, and he was like, it was like that moment of like, oh, she's super not okay with everything. It's kind of understandable, especially when she made that excuse to Maze, being like, oh, Trixie, yeah, she's super mad at you, so that's why I can't let you over. It's like, yeah, you were kind of still freaked out about the whole her being a demon thing. It kind of changed everything. Even though Trixie and Maze had a great relationship before, now you were never concerned about it. Even with Maze being as eccentric as she is, you were never worried before until you found out she was a demon. That suddenly changed everything, because it also made it so it's like, oh yeah, like she's in that complicated situation of like, it's also because it's like, it's not like Lucifer's just some demon, he's the devil, like, especially knowing all that she knows about Lucifer. And that, there's so many things. One, I thought was kind of interesting, the whole thing of like Maze kind of throwing it in her face. It's like, oh yeah, you lied to me about the whole Trixie thing, which I thought that was so cute. Trixie being like, of course I forgive you, big dummy. Like, I could never stay mad at you forever. And it's like, you know, Maze got one of her best friends back. I thought that was kind of adorable. But also, like, you know, it's like, because, you know, in Chloe's mind, it's like, well, the fact of the matter is I was dealing with everything, being like the only human that knows heaven and hell, all the celestial stuff is happening. It's like, actually, no, you're not. Linda knows, and yes, to be fair, Linda had her issues with it. Even she brings that up, but eventually she's known for a while now, and she's handled the adjustment fairly well. She's still figuring it out, but that's something we're going to talk about in a little bit. But kind of circling back to it, the whole thing that I found interesting was like the whole like church getting involved thing. Did not see that storyline coming. And then she met with Kinley, which interestingly enough, the actor who plays him, his name's Graham McTavish. That's the same actor who plays the cowboy, aka the Saint of Killers, in Preacher, which I just think is interesting, because it's like, oh yeah, DC/Vertigo comics published both Lucifer/Sandman, plus also published Preacher, so the comic book. So I just think it's just kind of interesting in that same regard. Just, you know, especially kind of like a heaven and hell type of show. He finds himself in another one like that. I just think that's kind of interesting like that. But nevertheless, I was so curious, like, what that was all about. I was like, wait, is she with some, like, crazy organization trying to get Lucifer? It turns out they deal with people who think they're possessed by demons or even think they're the devil. But this guy in particular, Kinley, he's had his eyes on Lucifer for a couple years now, and is like, I really believe him to be the devil. He starts bringing up all this terrible stuff about Lucifer and stuff like that. He even talks about, oh, every time Lucifer comes to Earth, there's always problems, stuff like that. But to be fair, I could be remembering, because didn't they bring that up in the previous season? Like, Lucifer comes to Earth, like, this is only hit, like, since he got here, like, what I guess is like 7 years ago, whatever. It's actually like the second time he's ever been to Earth, because he's only been to Earth once before, you know. Because obviously at the beginning of the series, he was already here for like, what, a couple years before the series had already started. But it's like, yeah, like he'd been here in the past once before years ago. Because I remember that being an episode. I can't remember if that was, I want to say it was season 3, because it seems fairly familiar, so I'm pretty sure it was a season 3 episode, but nevertheless, getting back to the point I made, I was just trying to make the fact is like, obviously you can tell he's like lying about a lot of stuff about Lucifer, because obviously he brings up some stuff that's happened over the course of the series, but he's talking about a lot of stuff that's like, oh, like the Chicago fire, even blaming him for like Nazis being a thing. It's like, because that's something Lucifer's always talked about. It's like, the fact is he gets blamed for a lot of stuff. It's like humans make their own choices. Yeah, I get blamed as being the reason why they do the terrible things that they do. Like, they do it kind of in my name. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. I don't push people to do things. They make their own choices. They have their own desires and everything. And so it's just kind of interesting but like I was trying to say, like, everything about Chloe's situation came from fear, and then you just have him just fanning those flames, which I thought was kind of interesting, especially the way he tried to manipulate Lucifer by actually going to him and being like, oh, I'm some Vatican investigator, and Chloe, she came to us, you know, she wanted to send you back to hell and stuff like that. But to be fair, obviously it was all Father Kinley's idea. But I just love how he tried to paint that picture, because it was all supposed to be like sowing the seeds of doubt between them and kind of breaking them apart. And I thought, like, did not see that coming. I thought it was actually kind of interesting, because I thought it was going to be bigger than what it was. I mean, it ended up being a big part. Obviously, it plays a crux to the overarching story. But what I mean is, I thought it'd be a larger organization thing. I guess maybe if he was able to prove that Lucifer was the devil, then maybe that would have said everything in a situation. But the thing is, like, he was the only one, like, because no one in the hierarchy of like the church believed him about Lucifer, so he was kind of going rogue and handling this whole situation the way he did, which is interesting considering the fact is he pushed a dude to commit murder, because that dude was kind of like, you know, that was the whole Los X situation where it's like all like two people were murdered. They were all like former gang members trying to get their life together. And basically, the dude that was behind this, he was like the drug counselor or whatever. He killed them because they would kind of slip back into old habits and stuff like that. And it's like, people falter sometimes, and you punish them for that, essentially. He made that choice, but he was very religious. And I guess, you know, Father Kinley was able to kind of convince him, like, no, this is the right thing to do. Because the whole point was to try to get Lucifer to reveal his face to the guy that was with them. But even the guy that was with him is like, the fact of the matter is, you push someone to commit murder. He's like, he was willing to make that sacrifice. It's like, yo, you really went off the deep end. I didn't expect that to happen. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. He ended up getting locked up for it. Even that priest kind of was like, if you need me to, I will testify against him, you know? It's like, dude, that's crazy. Because he's the one that actually points it out to, you know, it's like, oh, Chloe's like Lucifer's first love, right? Well, what if, even if he ends up being the actual devil himself, who's to say that Chloe is his first love? It's like, it has to be her. Who else would it be? That kind of plays out in the plot, but I'll kind of circle back a little bit to some interesting things. Like, that thing I thought was kind of fascinating was, like I said, like the whole, like, oh, like Chloe pretending like everything is okay when it's not. And the fact is, like, you know, the final thing that kind of broke the camel's back is the fact is that she's like, the fact is, you are this, you're like this embodiment of evil and everything, like, because, you know, Lucifer had caught her in a lie, because it's like, yeah, there's all this stuff, like, you were trying to send me back to hell and everything. She's kind of like, it's not like that. The fact of the matter is, what was I supposed to do? I saw your face, like, I got freaked out and everything like that, you know, because she ended up bringing up some stuff earlier too, being like, oh, you ever eat kids? And he was kind of like, no. And the fact is, she's like, well, you torture people in hell, you know, and he's like, I don't do that because I like it. I was given that job. That job was forced upon me. And you could tell, like, that was the beginning of him being like, wait, so things really aren't as copacetic between us as I thought they were, you know? Because Lucifer, you know, in her eyes, it's like, I was only going to work for him, like, just because for that second, but obviously I didn't go through with everything. But for Lucifer, it's like, the fact of the matter is, you would even consider that because it's me. But for her, it's still that thing of like, you are like, you're Satan, like you're embodiment of all evil. Like, what else was I supposed to think? And that's the most crushing thing to Lucifer, is like, even after everything, she looks at him like that. The thing that he was so scared of her ever knowing the truth, whether he really admitted it. It took him a while before he was able to finally admit, like, that's what his biggest fear was, her ever seeing his face. And, you know, because he went around always telling her, like, oh, I'm the devil, but he never showed her his face. And when the time came, like, he didn't have his devil face anymore. But it's just one thing after another, and it's kind of sad that, you know, they had gotten to that point. I mean, obviously Chloe also learns an interesting thing about the whole, like, oh, this, I didn't even think about that initially. It's like, oh yeah, she learns about his vulnerability. It's like, oh yeah, she's like, why do you get hurt sometimes, but then like you're fine others? It's like, oh, I'm vulnerable around you. And she's like, if I were to put this axe through you right now, your chest, you would die. And it's like, yeah, but you still stood in front of that axe for me, even though it meant you would have died. He's like, of course, like, you should already know that by now, detective, like, that he would die for her, you know? And it's just kind of interesting. Obviously, that gets complicated with the introduction of Eve. I like that they answered a lot of stuff I wondered too, like, okay, where's Eve been? It's like, oh, apparently she was in heaven, and then she just ended up leaving heaven. But I guess, like, when she left heaven, she was able to just kind of position herself back in her original body, which is kind of interesting. There was actually a line in this episode I thought was kind of fascinating, because Amenazel kind of was like, oh, did you do something to Lucifer? I mean, he did kill one of your children. I was like, I didn't even think about that. That was like something slightly pointed towards, but I guess for her, it's just kind of like, well, because when the person she thinks of most is probably Abel, like everything Cain did, she probably frowns upon. So she's probably not too concerned about him killing Cain, because it's like, well, Cain killed the child that you kind of assume she kind of cared about the most, that being Abel. So, but that was just kind of interesting that they just kind of went towards that conversation. It's just like a little thing, but I just thought that was kind of fascinating. It's like, because I didn't even think about that. Once again, I'm not that well versed in the Bible, so that whole connection of like, oh, you're Cain and Abel's mom. Didn't know that. It's old. I mean, technically, like, she's the first woman, so she's kind of like mother to all humans, but still, you get what I'm trying to say. Also, the whole thing of like her being literally created, I thought that was kind of fascinating. It's like, oh, I was literally made for Adam, which you find out Adam's just kicking it in heaven. But for her, it's like she's always kind of been of a rebel, so she kind of didn't like the rules and everything for heaven. In fact, she actually kind of talks about the fact that it's like, oh yeah, she'd wait by the pearly gates to kind of hear people come through, and like, oh yeah, really, kind of find out about Earth. And she found out that Earth is a party scene. But then it turns out, like, that's not her only motive. Her other main motive for coming back was for Lucifer, which I wondered if there was, like, an even deeper reason why. But it's like, no, like, and it's kind of sweet. Like, her reason for coming back was love. It's like her and Lucifer had a relationship thousands of years ago. I even love that whole conversation about it. It comes up about the apple and everything. And it's like, oh, it wasn't really an apple. It was a banana, a very large one. And then Lucifer's like, well, very true. And just like, I was like, oh, what? That's so crazy. We're making these innuendos like that. That was interesting. That is kind of interesting too. Like, I was about to bring up like the whole aspect of like, oh yeah, she was literally made for Adam. And turns out obviously like the person he was in love with before ended up being Lilith, but she was literally, you know, Eve was literally created to be his partner. And for her, that's why she cares so deeply for Lucifer, because Lucifer kind of taught her like, oh, I don't have to be bound to just Adam. Like, I can be my own person, you know? And it's actually interesting because it's like, oh, I was born from someone else's rib. So it's like a lot of who she is. It's like my existence was based on someone else's existence. So I came from another person, you know, so I was born from something that came from another person, and also I exist just to be the opposite to this other person, in that case being Adam. And it's like, that's so interesting to kind of be in that complicated situation. But Lucifer, he let her kind of live. He accepted her for who she was. So she was able to kind of be herself without having to just be, oh, I have to be this woman to please this man, you know, because it's like the whole thing is like, she can never be herself. She had to just be who she was made to be, and that was to be, you know, the other half to Adam and Eve. I even love later on when Chloe's like, wait, you're Eve from like Adam and Eve? And she's like, what? They still put his name first? Isn't this era supposed to be, this is supposed to be like a very progressive era, isn't it? But that whole dynamic too of like what that represented for Lucifer's character of kind of being torn between these two, like an old love, which even at the beginning you could tell he didn't really kind of flow with it in that same regard of like, because especially when she's like, oh, you're my boyfriend. He's like, wait, what? And even like talking to Linda about it, he's like, me and intimacy, what? But she's like, what about Chloe? You were literally about to give that a try. He's like, well, yeah, and we both saw how that happened and how that worked out. That literally crashed and burned in front of his face. But you kind of, and I like that being an element of this, of like both of them kind of tugging him in two different directions. Because obviously you have Chloe kind of tugging more towards the good nature of Lucifer, but then you have Eve tugging more at his devil side of being like, I accept you for who you are. She saw his devil face and still cared about him deeply. And the fact is, you know, because even Chloe asked us like, you saw his face and you weren't scared. She's like, why would I be? And Chloe's like, I don't know. Why would you, you know? And so that, I don't know. It's sad because even that whole case thing of like, oh, this is going to be our last case and everything. I love that Ella ended up getting high on Molly, and to kind of balance that out, they end up like giving her cocaine. It's like, holy shit, where are we going with all of this? I love that. And just like her being super hyper and just being just kind of like off the walls a little bit. It's like, okay, I'm gonna deal with this bomb and everything. It just, you know, I just thought that was kind of fascinating. But really quickly getting back to everything, it's like, it's sad too because it's just because you would tell like Eve, all she ever wanted to do was to love Lucifer. It's like, obviously you care about me and I love you deeply, but the fact is you can always tell there was always that thing about Chloe. Like, obviously it's not like Eve like had this evil plan, like, oh, I'm gonna kill everyone in your life. It's like, no, she tried to assimilate to his life. It's like, I become besties with all your friends. She got close to May. She got close to Linda. I even love that moment when he's trying to break up with her, so it takes her to couples therapy, and then she brings up the fact, like, Eve's like, and he does that thing where it's like, you give him advice and he just does the complete opposite, and Linda's like, I know, and they bond over that. So, and see what he's doing right now? He's deflecting. I know. Why haven't we met before now? I love that was their first meeting, and it ended up being this thing. And even Lucifer standing like, this wasn't what I wanted it to be. I thought this would end up breaking up the relationship. It just he ended up bringing those two together. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. But the thing is, like, you know, like I said, she just made friends with everyone in his life. Even getting close to Maze, and Maze being like, and she's like, oh, I heard about you from Lucifer, but look at you, had no idea you were so damn hot. And Maze is like, yeah, I like her. But I guess that's kind of like the sad part of that thing too, of just kind of representing what Eve did. Like, the fact is that she was constantly trying to be someone else, because it's like, I want to be the person that Lucifer loves. So even when he was trying to push her away, she tried to adapt and be like, no, I'm cool, I'm great, I'm amazing, you know, and so tries to kind of go with the flow of things, you know, especially when she finds out, like, oh yeah, Lucifer, why he does the job. It's like, oh, you do the job because you want to punish people. It's kind of there, but to be told is Lucifer does more so about getting justice. It's more about getting justice for people than it is punishment. Maybe in the beginning it started off like that, but now it's become that thing of like, no, he just kind of wants to get justice for people. And but Eve didn't necessarily understand that. But to be fair, at that time, Lucifer was kind of on a hell path of like, oh, I'm gonna punish people, because he was in that situation where he felt like him not punishing people, him not being his devil self, him not being the devil, meant that people were, you know, there will be casualties for it. Because there was that officer, Joan, who ended up dying because he ended up letting that dude Julian get away. Because it's like, oh, I'm not going to punish you, I'm going to let the cops do it when the time comes. And because of that whole situation, she died, even having Dan blow up him, which that's a whole thing in itself. But Dan blaming him, being like, oh, everything's your fault, all you do is just make things worse. Attacking Lucifer when he already felt bad enough about himself, and Dan saying all that just like pushed him even further. But like, obviously Eve is there being like, no, I accept you for who you are. This is who you are. Stop denying who you are. Because the sad thing is, Eve is holding on to the man that she fell in love with all that time ago, all those millennia ago, because that was the man who helped her finally be herself. And so she wants Lucifer to be that man again, and he kind of feels like he's in this position. And I thought it was kind of an interesting development for his character, where he started thinking, am I just pretending? Like, I'm here, you know, it's like, am I who I am at work? Is that me just pretending? Because it's like, he's asking like, Chloe, like, do I act differently around work? And she's like, well, we all kind of do. We kind of put our best foot forward. But for him, it's like, this whole persona I create, like this whole me I am at work, but who's to say that's even real to begin with? Like, if that's not even me, if there's no part of that in me, then who's to say that's even real in the first place, that maybe it's all constructed. But Chloe's just kind of saying, like, the fact is that the work is important to you, and that is your reasoning for being here. Kind of shows that, I'm butchering what she said, but it was so good. I wish I could remember the words exactly, but it was basically her trying to show him that this, who he is at work, is just kind of who he is too, that it isn't just like some fake persona he created. But there is like a lot of interesting things too. Like I said, it's not like Eve was like some evil person with ulterior motives. She kind of did everything for love, and like her working on cases with Lucifer being like, oh my god, we should go after this guy. Oh, this guy, he looks bad, and Lucifer's like, no, put those back. We're going after one person at a time. She's like, fine. I even love it later on when she's trying to make Lucifer jealous, and she starts acting like Chloe, dressing like her, and kind of having mannerisms with her, like her, and she even comes up with a great idea later on and kind of had to figure some stuff out. And it's like, no, she did a very good job. Obviously, that was her emulating Chloe, but still. I even love that moment when her and Ella first meet, and she's like, oh, you're Eve, huh? She's like, oh my god, you're Ella. The fact is, Lucifer talks about you so much. And that's kind of another thing that I really like, that I think is kind of neat, that that conversation comes up about, like, the fact is, when it comes about the people he cares about, Lucifer gushes about them. Because there was, I'm trying to blank on who it was. I'm blanking on who it was, but, like, at one point, like, oh yeah, it's that guy when it came to that necklace missing episode. Well, that was kind of fairly earlier in the season, but it's like, wait, you're that detective Lucifer gushes about all the time. It's like, oh, that's super sweet. That basically, like, Lucifer probably when he's off elsewhere, he's always kind of talking about Chloe, but the fact is, it's like, oh, like here Lucifer is talking about Ella and how smart and amazing she is. I thought that's pretty dope. And Eve hugs her, and she's like, almost like, damn you for using hugs against me like that. And it's kind of, it kind of pissed her off, because obviously she was trying to look out for, like, because she's team Lucifer and Chloe, but it's like, oh man, you're actually pretty cool. I kind of hate that. I even love it that Trixie kind of has a moment like that too, because she starts interrogating Eve, and it's like, what do you do for a job? She's kind of like, I don't have one, I just kind of get to be me. And she's like, actually and Trixie's like, actually that's pretty cool, because it's like, because she's looking out, because she's trying to look out for her buddy Lucifer, and it's just, it's like, oh, he needs a friend right now, and it's like, are you the friend that he needs right now? And it's just, I thought that's such a neat little moment of just her playing that little interrogator like that. Especially because she came in and started messing around with stuff. He's like, what are you doing here? And she's like, oh my god, this is your place is so cool. And like, I'm trying to remember, is that the first time she's ever been to Lucifer's place? I guess so. The fact that she was like so excited, like, I kind of felt like I remember her being there before, but I guess that's just my total imagination. But what I also thought was kind of sweet with, like, everything with, like, Eve and Chloe was that even though Chloe felt the way that she did, had that complicated thing of like, oh yeah, like, having seen his true face and everything, and it scared her, there's still a part of her that's like, honestly, when Lucifer wasn't working with her, like, she's like, oh yeah, he's not gonna be working with me anymore. But it's like, honestly, that when he was trying to help out Eve and everything, I love it, because it's like, she's like, I actually miss him. The fact of the matter is, because even like, Ella's like, the fact of the matter is, you two work so good together, like, you're the perfect team. So, because the hardest thing at the end of it all was the fact is that obviously Chloe feeling the way she did, it was still hard for her to accept, like, wrap her head around the whole, like, oh, celestial thing, and like, oh, he's the devil, and then the whole thing of like, because Lucifer was like, could you ever accept? But she's like, I don't know. She's like, I could try, but he's like, but could you ever? And shows her his devil face, and she's like, I don't know, and that was like the hardest thing to swallow. It's actually kind of interesting, because Ella kind of put things in perspective for her, which, like I said, there's stuff we're going to dive in about Ella, but she brought up this whole conversation of like, well, the fact of the matter is, there's contradictions within the Bible. Of like, look at Lucifer. Lucifer's considered to be like this epitome of all evil, right? Yet at one point in time, he was an angel. You can't go from being good to be completely evil. So it's like, and that was something that Chloe reminded herself. It's like, yeah, you are the devil, but you are also an angel. The fact of the matter is, you care about what's doing, like the difference between what's right and wrong. Yeah, because that's why remember, his thing is always about punishing the right person. That's always his thing. So it shows you that he is all about getting the right person and getting justice. It shows you that that's who he is. And that's, like I said, it's just an interesting development for his character, in the sense of like having that huge identity crisis. I mean, it's so interesting because obviously last season he's like, oh, I don't have my devil face anymore. Who am I? It's like questioning himself without it, especially his wings kind of being a reminder of who he was versus who he really is now. Because it's like, oh, these wings aren't representative of who I am. But now he has that situation of now all he's being defined by is his devil face. But Eve accepts him for it. But Chloe doesn't. But even later on, he admits, like, the fact is, I knew things between us wouldn't necessarily work, but, you know, it's just, he still went along with things anyway, because I think for him, you know, feeling so hurt after everything went down between him and Chloe, it's like, oh, we're back to being partners, and then we're not partners, and just things get super, super complicated. And I think for him, the fact is that someone looked at him and was like, saw his devil face and was like, I still love you, I still care about you. I think the sad thing is there's some part of Lucifer that kind of almost feels like he doesn't deserve love, you know? That he doesn't, and so that, you know, because that was even something, you know, that kind of comes up later on of being like, maybe you wanted, you know, Chloe to reject you, and it's like, why would I want her to reject me, you know? Because on some subconscious level, there's that part of him, like I said, that feels like he doesn't deserve, you know, her love. So there's a part of him kind of hoping that she would reject him, kind of that she'd have, I think he wants, like, Lucifer is very complicated in that regard. Like, he's got a lot of issues just stemming from just who he is and what's kind of been forced upon him, and just family in general. Obviously, plenty of dad issues. Like I said, I do apologize because I am all over the place. I'm going to continue being all over the place. But another element I really liked too was like it kind of concerning Lucifer. Like, for one, that whole episode of him like losing control of his devil side more and more, like his skin is changing. It's like subconsciously you could always control that, but now it's kind of going a little more out of his control. And obviously for him, is he worried about the prophecy coming true, because his wings went from angelic wings to pure demon wings, and now he's turning more and more into his devil self, and he can't shift back, and it's scaring him because, you know, it's like, what if the evil from the prophecy isn't just something else? Like, what if I'm the evil? What if the evil that gets released is something within me? It was actually kind of a fascinating thing in that episode, because remember, like, near the end, it's like, oh, because he was full on devil mode like that, his powers of kind of like absorbing, like getting people to reveal their desires, it was kind of out of his control. So his mojo was kicking into overdrive, that literally everyone in the club was telling him their desires. It's never been that widespread, because usually it's one person at a time. He's never had a reason to kind of do that on multiple people, but to see it in that instant, I was like, so does that mean on any given moment in time he could literally do that? It's just he chooses not to. I feel like this season heavily showcased a lot more of his demon side. Well, him being the devil, like, I feel like there was more instances of it than you typically would see in a season. Like, at least in the past. Maybe that's just me just kind of, I don't know. Maybe that's not the case at all. It was actually kind of sad when he first learned about his wings looking like that, and he called Linda. He was like, I don't want to be a monster. That he was terrified like that. Hence, that's what led to him trying to break up with Eve the entire time. But like I said, I love her actually. Like, every time he's trying to, it's like, oh yeah, it hurt him hanging out with the boys, like playing, I guess it's like fantasy football or something like that. And she gets into it, like he's playing video games, so that she starts playing too. Like, because obviously she's trying to make things work. It's like, okay, you're going this way. Well, I'm gonna conform to that way to make it so that we work. Like I said, it's just kind of sad that she was like that desperate for his love, because she even admits it later on at the end of the season, like, she was trying to be that person that Lucifer made her feel like who she was when her and Lucifer were together all those years ago. She was kind of trying to recapture that, but it's like, that's not who she really is. And she, just like Lucifer, she doesn't even really know who she is. Lucifer kind of found himself over the course of this season, still trying to figure himself out. And I think, in the end, Eve ended up kind of finding herself in that same situation of being like, things aren't as clear cut to me as I thought they were, because she realized like what she's doing with Lucifer is literally the same thing she did with Adam, where she's conforming herself to be this person that I know that this person would love. I'm being that person that they would fall in love with, the perfect person that they would love. But that's not me being who I am, not being true to who I am. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. There was also the interesting thing of the introduction of the demons at the end of the season. I thought that was kind of fascinating. The whole aspect of like, oh yeah, demons can go to a body. Like if someone gets sent to hell, like it kind of gives them a beacon of like, oh, we could go to this body. To be fair, that's how like the goddess found her way to Charlotte in the first place. But it's like they had never really explained that role back in season 2 when that happened. But now we kind of got an explanation for it, because it makes it easier for demons to kind of trail that back to the dead body to possess. I mean, because I guess the understanding would be like, oh, she was able to do it just because she's the goddess, so she kind of breaks rules. But it's like, no, like, any demon could do it. And so it's kind of interesting, because that was a conversation that I always had before of like, what about hell? Will we ever get introduced to that? Is there going to be like some new demon taking over hell? That kind of played into like the arc and everything. And so I thought it was kind of interesting that they kind of like, they dabbled with that. And I just like the way they handled that. Like, you know, I mean, granted, it was like at the end of the season, but it was still kind of interesting that they tackled it at all, because that was something I was wondering about. Like, what's hell like? Now, because apparently it seems like hell's kind of been a little out of whack since Lucifer left and everything, but still, I thought that was kind of fascinating. Other developments to talk about this season, obviously, Dan was kind of interesting. Like, one, like the whole aspect of him being pissed at Lucifer because of the whole Charlotte thing. Like, because for him it's like, oh yeah, I'm used to you taking digs at me, but the fact of the matter is I'm not taking it anymore. Like, Dan, like there's a lot of stuff like obviously, I'm like I said, I'm jumping around. Him and Ella, I didn't see that coming. If anything, I thought it was gonna be him and Maze, just because of like, oh yeah, because Maze is like, oh yeah, you want to kick ass a little bit. Like, if you ever need to kind of kick ass, let me know. To be fair, he never did that again, because I guess, you know, Dan is so lost in himself that he tried to be like, no, that's not who I am. But, you know, so I just thought that's kind of interesting. Like, they actually make a really good team, him and Maze. I mean, to be fair, they've kind of hinted this before, because the guy that had killed Chloe's dad, they set up that whole situation together, that boarded, to get him killed. So it's not that surprised. They've kind of got their dark connections and everything. But still, it's just kind of interesting to see it kind of resurface like this. So that's why part of me was thinking like, oh, that's where that was going to go. Did not see the whole him and Ella situation. But obviously, like, Dan is kind of excited the entire season. I'm like, it's kind of interesting because, like, obviously you get that levity between Lucifer and Dan. But every time Lucifer cracks a joke at him, like, he gets super pissed. So it's like, yeah, because, like, for him, he's still dealing with the Charlotte thing. He's trying to pretend like he's okay. But the fact is, he's really not. And it's not till the end where he really realizes how not okay he is. I mean, because he snaps at Lucifer, being like, oh, Lucifer gets away with everything, because of him everything goes bad. There's that Julian dude, he ended up like breaking essentially breaking his spine and everything, kind of paralyzing him, like super messing him up. And then like he ended up going to that dude's dad, because in his mind it's like, oh, that dude's just going to ruin Lucifer's reputation. I want to destroy his reputation because he can't get away with all the stuff that he does, which is interesting considering the fact is you literally beat up some, like, you went outside of the law to beat up some bad guys. But I guess in his, like, you know, it's like, it's potatoes and potatoes. It's like Lucifer does something out of the way, it's like, oh, screw him. But you do things, oh, it's fine, I'm having fun, I'm doing this. But I guess maybe since he didn't do it the rest of the season, he only did it with the Los Ex situation. So I guess beating them up was it was a means to an end type of situation. So it's like, whereas Lucifer's, it's like, oh, there's no means to an end with that. It's like, for him, it's like, we were trying to get intel about. So I guess that's a whole thing in itself. But it's just like, I think it's a little hypocritical, especially considering it's like, oh, you want to blame Lucifer and stuff. Once again, do we want to go back to what you were up to back in season 1, the shady shit you were in? Like, I think it's just a little hypocritical, but still. Like I said, Dan isn't in the right mindset, so I can forgive a lot of it just because he is hurting. It's like, he's kind of acting like a dick a lot of the season, but you understand it's coming from a place of pain. And obviously he's concerned more so about the people around him. Obviously, like, you know, Chloe, he doesn't want Chloe to kind of get mixed up in, you know, everything related to Lucifer, you know, because especially where he is, and he's just going to end up dragging her down. But once again, though, Julian's dad, he didn't realize Julian's dad was the monster that he was. And so it's like, wait, he's the bad guy, he's the killer potentially behind all this, and now put a target on Lucifer's back, which Chloe and Lucifer never found out about, which I'm sure if they ever did, that'd complicate things a lot. Because what also kicks, you know, Dan ended up kicking his own ass for it later on, because it's like Trixie almost got involved in that situation. You know, she wasn't just almost, she got straight up involved in that situation. And if it wasn't for Lucifer and Eve looking after her, like, that situation could have gone wrong, and that was because of him. And he even talks about it later on, he's like, I did so many stupid things. Like, I'm blaming Lucifer for so much, but to be fair, it's not even his fault. The fact of the matter is, I did all this because I needed someone to blame. It was easier to blame Lucifer, and obviously he blames himself, but so much stuff is out of his own control. So I think that was something Dan kind of had to learn. And interestingly enough, that's a lesson Lucifer had to learn, of like, you have to forgive yourself because it's not on you. Because Lucifer had that whole thing of like, oh, he learns that his epiphany is that he hates himself. It's kind of what he because the fact is, he blames everyone. He's getting these excuses. It's like, it's his dad, it's this, it's that. It's like, at the end of the day, I hate myself. And he tries to figure out why he does. Because to him, he feels like he brings nothing but destruction to all the people around him. And he's like, kind of like, everything that kind of goes wrong, he blames himself. And it's like, it's on me that this all happened. So learning to kind of let go and forgive himself. It wasn't something easy, you know, something even Linda tells him later on, like, that's not as easy as you kind of make it out to be. But getting to what I was talking about earlier, like the whole Dan and Ella situation, which it makes sense. I think that's kind of a thing, that a commonality between everyone this season. Everyone was lost in some shape or form. Like I said, everyone kind of had identity crisis of who they are and find out where they stand with everything. Because Dan and Ella were lost, and I think they found comfort in each other. And I love that moment where there was that crime at the high school. They were leaning us against the lockers and stuff like that, being awkward around each other. So I was like, this seemed like something that would be kind of like in a teen high school melodrama or something like that. Just them leaning against the lockers and everything. It's like, oh yeah, what happened before? It's like, yeah, we can handle this, like, you know, like adults and stuff like that, and being weird around each other. I even love every time, like, it's like, right, hey, you know, Dan's ex-wife, yes, his ex-wife, the mother of his child, and everything like that. It's like, what? Yeah, Chloe. It's like Ella feeling so guilty about it. To be fair, it's like Dan and her are broken up, but I think for her, she still feels awkward about it, because it's like, oh, I'm getting in the middle of your family. I feel weird and disgusting about it, but it's like, oh, it's cool. I do like that, though. That'd be kind of an interesting thing to kind of see where things could potentially go forward with them. I think that's kind of something interesting. I am kind of, it's interesting that they didn't tackle anything about Ella's, like, ghost side of things. To be fair, once again, the whole thing about, like, those 2 bonus episodes, that was supposed to be something potentially for season 4. They were just episodes that were supposed to be kind of be able to be put in any random place. So I guess you could make the argument to think, like, oh, technically that would be a part of season 4, even though it's technically part of season 3. I guess that's a thought process behind it. So, but still, it's just, they didn't really tackle it at all. Still something they could be potentially saving for the future, but nevertheless. But speaking of Ella and everything, I thought it was kind of interesting, her arc, because obviously after everything that went down with Charlotte, like, me and the big guy, we're not in a good place. And I even like that line from Lucifer. It was like, well, if you aren't, that's his loss. But obviously, like, you know, she's like drinking and doing drugs and partying, like not going to church and stuff like that, because she kind of lost her faith. Because it's kind of like, the fact is, God can let, like, some terrible stuff like that happen, especially if someone that I know. Like, there can't be a plan, there can't be a reasoning in all of this. I even love that thing earlier on in the season where it's like, oh yeah, you got to let Chloe have her space and kind of go at it slowly. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And then Lucifer immediately goes like, telling Ella, I'm the devil and everything. And obviously she takes it as a joke and everything like that. It's like, oh, yeah, my brother is an angel. It's like, oh, yeah, he's an angel. Did he get his wings? And then Lucifer, like, oh, she's like, oh, and I guess bitch, he got wings. And he has wings. And Lucifer's like, yeah, I recently got them back. And Chloe's there looking at him like, That's something I also forgot to talk about, too. I love that whole thing of, like, she's like, it is a little funny being on the inside joke, like, knowing the whole celestial thing. Anytime he makes a reference to something devilish or something, like, most people will chalk it up to be a metaphor. Because she's like, it's kind of mean, because most people will sit there and be like, what the hell is the metaphor that he's trying to get across? That's literally the entire, like, chunk of, like, season 1 when it came to, like, Lucifer and Linda, her trying to think, like, oh, everything he's speaking is, like, some metaphor about his life, but it's like, no, he means it literally, you know? And it's like, she even admits, like I said, Chloe was like, yeah, it's actually kind of fun to be on the other side of those jokes, to be on the end of, like, when you make a devil pun or something like that. It's like, oh yeah, like, that is kind of funny in a weird way, you know? But I also love Ella for just being the adorable human that she is, just because, like, she's, you know, taking stuff off her bucket list. Like, two of my favorite, like, dirty moments with Ella, like, one is just, they're inappropriate. One is just, like, the whole thing about, like, oh, like, Lucifer got the dress for Chloe for their date earlier in the season, and it's like, oh yeah, dress on, panties off, all in the shower, and then Lucifer's like, no, that's too much. He's like, I'm just kidding, you know, the fact of the matter. He's like, keep going. I love that being a thing. And also later on when that those twins, that twin murder where, like, one of their sisters got killed, and it's like, oh, it was a hammer that did it, and like, you have, like, Ella being like, stop, hammer time, and she started doing it. She's like, oh, come on, guys, I've been waiting years for an opportunity like this. I'm like, that's super messed up, Ella. Like, I mean, to be fair, that's Ella, and I would not want her to be any other way. I do appreciate her kind of being, like, the love bug in this season and everything, because obviously she's pushing, you know, Chloe, and Lucifer's like, no, you guys will make it. She's there trying to help, being supportive, but, like, because she does like Eve when Lucifer's just talking about, like, the fun they had, like, the orgy and everything. I even love Maze getting pissed, like, oh, like, the fact of the matter is, I just turned my back for, like, I'm going for a few months, and you come back and, like, oh, you're having orgies and stuff without me. It's like, well, to be fair, there was that period of time where it's like, you know, they weren't good, so he's still having orgies and everything like that. But still, I just thought that was kind of neat. I even love him being so distracted, kind of, and I thought that was kind of a neat episode, kind of representing the situation he was in, torn between his loyalties to Chloe as that to Eve, because that was something Linda was getting at, of like, you're going to basically bring yourself undone because you're trying to be these two different people. You know, it's like you're trying to party it up and live that life with Eve, but now you're trying to do the same thing with Chloe and everything. I even love when they were supposed to be working on their final case and everything, because he wanted to get closure with the whole Chloe situation, was that they were both looking for excuses. They're like, no, oh, we need this, we need to do this. And then Ella is like, no, I got it. She covered every basis, so everything they would need to worry about with the crime. She's like, oh, look at you tested me. She's like, no worries, Decker, I got this. And she'd already going through a lot of the extra steps to make it so that the case was closed, but turned out not to be. But still, I just thought that was kind of a little neat thing. It just, even with Lucifer being like, oh, come on, you know, the fact is that she kept going afterwards and being like, oh yeah, like I carried everything out, like this case is solved, you know, it's all, you know, done. I thought that was kind of neat, because it's so funny, because you feel like Ella would have read that situation and been like, oh, I get what you guys are trying to do. You're trying to extend the case for your own reasons. But I guess for her, it's like, no, she just looked at it as kind of like a, oh, no, they're trying to, you know, it's like, oh, they're trying to put me through the ringer and see if I handled all the back work with a lot of this, you know, case and stuff. So, like I said, I just thought that was fascinating. Like I said, brought up earlier, I did like that, you know, Dan and Ella kind of found comfort in each other, that they had each other to kind of rely on and everything, because and I like where Ella kind of ends up at the end of the season, because obviously for her and the big guy have like a lot of issues, but for her it's like, you know, it's like for her it's like, I can't just like turn on my fate just because it's like, oh, not everything is all rainbows and unicorns. It's like God isn't there to kind of help like with those situations. He's there to give us the strength that we have so we can, you know, make it through those terrible things, like the whole Charlotte situation. Because it's like, it's because Ella's like, yeah, I miss her too, especially because Ella was kind of like Charlotte's, you know, moral compass and everything, you know. So, and obviously like Dan and brings up the whole aspect to later on about the whole like enjoying the time while you have, because like him and Charlotte, he's like, I wasted so much time that we could have been together, but life is so short, you never know how things are going to play out, so you need to kind of enjoy that time while you have the chance. Which, that's interesting how that ties into Maze's story. I did not expect the whole thing of her falling for Eve. I was like, ooh, that's going to get complicated. I even love that whole conversation early on. It's like, wait, are you still mad at me for betraying and trying to kill you, you know, working with Cain and everything? And she's like, that was like a month ago. And he's like, no, what am I going to hold a grudge against you? What am I, human? So I love that, because I was wondering if that was really going to get tackled or not. It's like, no, that was kind of quickly being like, nah, that's done. It's okay. We're good. I do like I said, how they handled Maze this season, because obviously, like, Maze is still slightly in that position where she's still trying to figure stuff out for herself, because obviously, like, a big chunk of her story, you know, obviously figuring herself out, and not just in this season, but obviously, like, just in the past in general, was becoming a bounty hunter. That, you know, she found something outside of Lucifer to kind of make her own, to have her own life. And so, but for this, it was like about connections, obviously being there for Linda, you know, the whole Amenadiel situation, which I have to talk about that as well. I think it's kind of fascinating. But like I said, the whole her and Eve thing kind of took me by surprise. Like, she went on all those terrible dates and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, how do you, like, Eve's like, oh, practice on me. And she's like, okay, so how do you start a date? She's like, you want to have sex? And Eve's like, yeah, sex is good, but, you know, kind of wait a couple sentences before you get to that. And then they're talking and stuff like that. And I thought that was kind of a neat little thing. I even love that thing later on when they are, you know, working together, because she's trying to make Lucifer jealous, but Lucifer's focusing more on the whole, like, oh yeah, like, I'm deviling out without control and it's spreading across my body, and Chloe's trying to help him cover that up. But it's like, oh, like, she starts making out with Maze because she's like, oh, that's going to make Lucifer super jealous. And I love that, like, it's kind of like, oh, like, it sucks because it's like you see Eve being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get Lucifer's attention. She's still trying to win him back, but it's heartbreaking when you look at Maze, because like everything Maze is doing, even the whole like grand gesture of singing, and I think even Lucifer got it. Sad thing is Eve couldn't see it, but Lucifer being like, well, I'll be damned when she gets up there and fucking brings the house down with her song of being like, you know, trying to make a grand gesture is kind of what Dan was kind of suggesting her to do. Sadly, Eve took it as like, oh man, this could be a grand gesture I showed to Lucifer to show him how much I love him, and it's just like, oh damn, that sucks. But I love that whole thing of like her following Linda all around, being like, oh yeah, this is our baby, and Linda being like, wait, our baby? This is, for one, this is my baby. What are you talking about? It's just because she was kind of latching on, because obviously Linda's her best friend. I even love it at one point, Linda's like, do you have feelings for me? She's like, well, you know, the whole thing of like, you know, the whole vibe of like, oh yeah, good things called small packages. But other than that, it's like, no, we're just friends. It's like, oh, it's good. But obviously for her, it's like, oh, she wants to protect her and the baby because she's Auntie May's. And that was a whole thing too. Like, because the whole thing is like, she missed so much. There was like a couple months she was gone because she was hunting down a blanket to give to Linda. And it's actually kind of sad because obviously we hear a little bit about Lilith when Eve talks about it, and we kind of hear about it, because I was like, right, because Lilith is like mother to all demons, and so obviously that includes Maze. And I think that's kind of interesting because like it seems like she wasn't much of a mother, so when she's with Linda at the whole class thing for babies and stuff like that, and the whole motherhood thing, like it's just like, oh yeah, nurturing your baby and being there and stuff like that, that whole thing kind of, you can tell it bothered Maze, because I think that was kind of another way of her kind of compensating. Like she's trying to be like an extra, she's trying to be extra in, you know, there in Linda's baby's life because her own mother wasn't there. It's like, you know, it's like that's her biggest gripe with Lilith, you know. And the way they were kind of talking about her in past tense, it's almost like she isn't alive. Because to be fair, like when it was all said and done, I thought that's potentially where Eve's story was going to go. I thought like they were going to kill Eve. She, potentially goes to hell. And then I thought like, oh, like the demon that would end up possessing her body, I thought that was going to be Lilith or something. But the way they kind of talk about it, it seems like Lilith is dead, or maybe there's something else with that. But the fact that they bring her up makes me think like that could potentially be kind of a little like something that kind of could blow up and be something bigger in the future, but we'll see. I even love that whole thing of like Maze asking about the fact is of like giving childbirth. It's like, is it really true that when you're giving birth to a child, like basically it's a ceremony of blood and pain? And Linda's like, what? No, it's not like that. And even being like, oh, no matter what the case may be, your Maze is like, your sex hole will never be the same thing again. It's like, why do you have to phrase it like that? It's so crazy. I even love that thing of like her kind of showing off all these different knives to Trixie, and Dan's there. It's like, okay, how about you don't give knives to my child? And it's like, for one, the knives aren't for Trixie. They're for a baby. Which obviously I can't forget to talk about. I've been kind of saying that, but like let's also talk about the fact is Linda being pregnant. Didn't see that coming, because I was wondering, like, because the fact is it's like, you know, them conceiving a baby shouldn't be possible, them being celestials and everything like that. But Lucifer kind of, it's like, because I love Aminadel is kind of like, oh yeah, I was thinking that the entire time Linda must be an angel or like some other creature. So it's like, oh, it's so obvious. But then Lucifer's like, or when you were losing your wings and your powers, that you ended up becoming a lot more mortal than we realized. And then you have Aminadel being like, yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense. I love that. But it's like, I even love the whole conversation about all the different names that they were going to give the baby. There's certain things that part of me wonders, like, is that supposed to be like a lot of that's like biblical names and stuff like that, but it's like they were going to name the baby Jack. It's like, that's interesting, because obviously like Supernatural, the TV show, there's like a half angel, half human baby named Jack. I was like, is that supposed to be like a weekend nod to that in some shape or form? I mean, I'm sure like in the Bible there's like a Castiel, because they reference a Castiel in this as well. So it's like, it's just interesting. Like like I said, I'm just not that well versed in Bible stuff, so it just, some of that probably it was just kind of interesting. But I like that he was trying to give like their child like all these different names. I do like that they settled on Charlie, you know, for Charlotte. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. That's so cool. But I love the whole conversation between Chloe and Linda. The moment Chloe's like, how, so you've known this entire time? I was like, well, I haven't known the entire time. But she's like, yeah, I'll admit, I didn't handle it the best either. But it even points out later on, she's like, when you actually think about how crazy my life is, my friends kind of put me in danger, because she was always kind of trying to prepare herself, or like she's training and stuff like that. And she ended up punching Maze at the beginning. I love that. And a minute I'll be like, whoa, Linda, Maze, you can't fight over me. It's like, we're not fighting over you. It's like, he's like, right, that's not what's happening here. It's like, I'm glad you're so full of yourself, you think that. I love that thing too. Like I meant to talk about it. It's like what Aminadel ended up doing in this season. I kind of was surprised, because I was like, oh, he went back to heaven. I figured he'd go back to going to his role. And that's even something Lucifer brought up. It's like, oh yeah, you're here, brother. The fact of the matter is you went to heaven, you got your wings back and everything, so it's all good, right? You know, go where you want to be, because that's where you basically wanted to be the past 3 seasons. And it's like, that's not where he wants to be anymore, because it took Maze kind of pointing things out to him to be like, no, this is your home now. So obviously that's why you're trying to make any excuse to say, it's like, oh, you need anything? Like, just, no, if you need me, I'll stay here. It's like, oh, you're dealing with Chloe, I'll be here to kind of support you in whatever need you need, brother. You know, so it's kind of neat. But I love that, you know, like I said, Linda's kind of tripping about her life. But for her, it's like, even the craziness that is her life, she got so much out of it. She got Maze as a best friend. She has the most interesting patient in all of history, that being Lucifer. That is any therapist's like wet dream, because it's like there's so many daddy issues there, and just so many like self-esteem issues. There's a lot psychologically you can like pull from Lucifer. It's just like, oh, he's such a fascinating person to kind of depict, kind of pick his brain, kind of understand who he is and stuff like that. So plus she's also getting a kid out of this whole situation too. It's like, it's kind of crazy, because that's also another conversation kind of tying into like, oh, not knowing who you be, kind of being surprised at who you are. That was another part of like the whole conversation I was bringing up earlier about Lucifer being like, I don't know if the person I am right now is even like who I am at work is even real. It's like, first, like Chloe was like, look at me, like I in 15 years would have never thought I'd be the detective that I am, the mother that I am, kind of doing what I'm doing. And it's like, but lo and behold, here I am, because people change every day. We're always constantly changing, so who we are kind of changes as well, and like I said, that statement kind of runs true for everyone in this season. I thought was kind of pretty dope. I also love kind of something I've been hinting to. I was like, are we going to meet any more siblings? And lo and behold, we meet at least one sibling this season, and that's Remy. And it's kind of interesting because it seems like she favors Amenadel a lot, because it seems like he's the one that kind of trained her to be like, oh yeah, humans aren't anything. Which that whole thing ended up bringing up an interesting thing, because she's like, why don't you freeze time? And he's like, I can't. And then he makes up an excuse of like, oh yeah, why don't we hunt and do this and that. I was like, oh wow, you got your wings back, but not your powers. But I guess for him, it's like, because his explanation for it too is like, I don't need my powers anymore, because that's me distancing myself from people. Like, it's just me kind of freezing the world so I don't have to interact with humans and stuff like that. But it's like, no, like, so for him, he doesn't need that power anymore. I mean, he ended up fighting Remy and handling, well, Remiel, but just Remy, ended up handling that pretty interestingly. I love that when it came down to it, she was like, oh yeah, of course Lucifer would have had a kid. It's like, oh, you think the baby that you're sensing is Lucifer's? Like, well, of course. And it's like, yeah, I think everyone would literally jump to that conclusion, especially considering Amenadel is like, he's the favorite son. The fact is that he is the way he is, that he was always kind of like the stickler for the rules. He's always the one following dad's orders and stuff like that, which kind of makes me think, really quickly, kind of the whole him and May's situation. I love them being kind of Linda's supernatural support team. And when she was trying to put like the gel on Linda's belly, like Maze grabs it and the doctor's like, what is that? And she tastes it. She's like, all right, go ahead. I even love the whole conversation of like, oh, we should give the baby a middle name or something like that. How about, like, they were trying to come up with different names and stuff like that. I don't know if it was necessarily the middle name, but it was just a name in general. And it was like, how about Michael? And he's like, no, definitely not Michael. It's like, what's up with that? I feel like if anything, like the way a lot of stuff kind of depicts it, you'd assume like Michael and Lucifer had the biggest issue. Maybe Lucifer doesn't have that big of an issue with that particular brother, but maybe like Amenadel does. Like, maybe there's something there that, obviously long history, So I just thought that like little winks and nods to like fellow, brothers and sisters, like the whole Remy situation. I was actually just surprised she just let it go. She's like, all right, brother, but to be fair, maybe at some point in time you're going to regret it. Obviously that was kind of foreshadowing, but to be fair, it kind of worked out, but that still could be foreshadowing for even further in the future. But I thought Remy was going to be like, lie and be like, oh, okay, I'll leave this whole situation alone, brother. But, thought she would secretly come after Linda, but it turned out that was just Maze following her anyway. I thought like it was going to work out where it's like, oh, she's just going to happen to be following her and end up protecting her like she wanted to. Turned out not to be the case at all, but still. I was almost kind of halfway expecting there might be another sibling that ends up coming there too, but because obviously, like, Amenadel's position on humans changed, because for him it's a situation of like, yes, they're flawed, but so are we. But the fact of the matter is, like, they do something that we don't. They connect. It's also an interesting conversation too, because obviously this is kind of a new thing, like the whole Charlie situation, because humans being with angels being with humans isn't something that's kind of like ever really happened. It's kind of like frowned upon and stuff. So Charlie's kind of the first of his kind, half human, half angel. So this is kind of unprecedented territory, and I love Linda's freaking out about it. But then Amenadel is kind of like, isn't this exciting? But he brought up an interesting thing of like, oh yeah, like angels were just kind of born. There was no like growing up. They just existed one day as they are now. There was no like growing up. So like Charlie is kind of like, oh, he's going to age like potentially as a human. Once again, we don't know like the biology of him being like half angel, half human. I thought like, because I was wondering if that was going to be like the twist in the situation of, because he was more mortal at that time, that him getting Linda pregnant, like the baby was still, but to be fair, even though he lost his powers and stuff like that, at his core he was still an angel, so I guess that still got passed on no matter how, weak his angelhood was at that time. It was sad, that whole situation with the dude Caleb, because that was kind of like his first steps to kind of like practicing fatherhood and stuff like that. I even love Caleb calling him out, being like, "Whoa, am I supposed to be just kind of like a test run for you?" And Amendel's like, "No, he's like, nah, dude, I'm just busting your balls." I'm like, I like that, because like typically that'd be the thing, like, so I'm just a test to you, and that'd be kind of a thing. But it's like, no, it wasn't. Like, because Caleb at the end of it all is like, the fact is you looked after me like this, you helped prove that I was innocent, shows that like, hey man, when it comes to this whole dad thing, you're gonna crush it. And obviously the plans he set up with Caleb and stuff, it's like, it sucks that things kind of played out that way. And then Amenadol went to get revenge, and even Lucifer having his back of like, this is what you like, he knew that Amenadol needed that, and that obviously plays a part in the whole thing of like Amenadol wanting to take him to the Silver City, because it's like, oh, like for him it's like, oh, he put so much faith in humanity, being like, oh, humanity's interesting and stuff like that, it's fascinating. So I was actually surprised he never actually went to Dan about advice on being a father. I mean, but to be fair, I guess it's that situation of like, well, Dan raised a girl, so maybe that's kind of the reason why he kind of didn't really go to Dan specifically. But also, I guess because it's like, well, him and Dan weren't hanging out, because Dan doesn't do the whole improv thing, which I think is kind of a nice little thing to kind of like tie back, because obviously that was something he used to kind of get through a lot of his issues, like his divorce and stuff like that. So improv was his way of handling things, but obviously he's kind of in a darker place, so it's like, yeah, I kind of don't really do that anymore. So I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Something I was just thinking about, just because of the whole Amenadel not killing him thing, was the whole because that was something I meant to bring up earlier. I knew there was something else that Chloe had said about Lucifer that kind of made him go like, wait, what? Was the whole thing of her being like, him killing Pierce, because the thing is, she was kind of under the impression like he'd killed other people before, but he's like, no, Pierce is the first human I've ever killed. It didn't even cross my mind to even think of something like that. It's like, wow. Because once again, it's that whole thing of like how he sees himself. It's just kind of like, because that was his thing of like, oh, the fact is my devil face is back. That's why he was afraid to even look at his wings, because if they were gone, that meant that, there was no more of that angel side of him, that there was no redemption for him, that he was stuck being this bad guy, But that whole thing at the end I thought was kind of fascinating. The whole thing of like, oh yeah, like the demons were like, because it's interesting, because obviously it makes sense why, but like hell is structured in a way where it's like no demon could ever take control. It has to be a celestial, so it's meant to be like, oh, Lucifer has to be the one to take over hell. No one else can kind of take the throne from him. I thought obviously that's where baby Charlie comes into play, and obviously Eve kind of feels bad about having set that all in motion, because she's like, oh, like the fact of the matter is, if me and Lucifer go back to hell together, if I'm in hell with Lucifer, we can just be together forever and not have to worry about anything. Like he won't have to get these bad influences from this world. Kind of that's a plan she kind of came up with, with Kinley, just because, he was trying to stop the prophecy in his own way. But it's kind of interesting how a lot of this stuff ends up being kind of a self-fulfilling type of situation, because it turns out his first love wasn't Eve. Like, they had their spark and everything, but the first time he fell truly in love with someone is Chloe. He's been in love with her for a very long time. And it's kind of sad. Like, obviously, like, luckily they would kind of save the day, because it was so interesting, because, like, for Chloe, it's not like, oh, I'm worried about you going full devil and, me being scared. It's like, no, I'm afraid that if you do, that means you'll forget about all of this, you'll forget about me and leave, and I don't want to lose you, showing that she isn't afraid anymore, that she loves him and accepts him. And I think, at the very end, to kind of get that at the very end, she's like pleading with him and like, please don't leave. And it's like, it's just, for him, it's like, because he can't take the chance, because if he doesn't go back to hell at the end, like he scared all the demons back to hell for now, because like now no one's going to question his authority, but it's like, that's not going to last forever. Like eventually they're going to come back up. They're going to either come after Charlie or they might come after her. And, he can't have that, so he's got to go back to hell. And I do like at the very end, no matter what the circumstances are, because of everything between him and Chloe, we see that his wings are back to being angelic wings, because of the position, the destiny he's kind of set himself forth, like the road he's putting himself down, I think, And it's just sad, like when the words are finally said, because she even said it, like she waited till Lucifer was asleep. I thought it was kind of a nice moment of her being like, yeah, she kind of, like she hates the way he's being happy, because she was, jealous, because obviously she wanted Lucifer to be happy, even being like, oh, she thought Eve was good for Lucifer as long as he was happy. And at the end of the day, that's what everyone kind of wanted for each other. Eve wanted, Lucifer to be happy. Lucifer wanted Chloe, and, Eve to be happy, you know? So I think when the whole Maze situation happens, like, oh, you and Maze are together. Like, obviously, I think he felt like there was something there. That's why he was reluctant to believe it. But I think when it came down, like, when that, he was like, I'll be damned about her singing. I think that was a moment where he realized, like, oh, like, he probably might have figured out that's when Maze, like, really does feel about Eve, but it might not have been like a full, like, reciprocated, like, type of situation, but still. Like I said, it just seemed like a season where they kind of showed off his devil stuff more, because obviously, like, him and Menadel and Maze kind of kicking those demons' asses at the end. Obviously, like, the bar fight he was in, where I love Eve being like, oh my god, this is going to be my first bar fight, this is going to be amazing, you know? And lo and behold, it ended up being a cool bar fight. I even love that she's kind of biting her lip, being like, oh, seeing Lucifer kick ass, it's like, yeah, like, obviously that was the man she loved, like, all those years ago, to see him kind of, like, be kicking ass like that, kicking ass, taking ass and kicking names. I still got to remember where the hell that's a reference from. I don't remember. Oh, it's going to bother the shit out of me. I got to Google that. I'm trying to remember where I got that from. It is really interesting, though, that, like I said, to see things where they are. It's like, you know, Lucifer back in hell, kind of trying to keep the demons on lockdown to make sure that they don't come to Earth and cause problems. That still could be something that ends up being beyond his control, but still. You have, you know, like I said, Ella kind of getting her religion back a little bit, like I said, everything between her and Dan kind of being there for each other when they're lost. You know, I think, like I said, it's going to be interesting seeing them kind of go forward. Obviously, Amenadel and Linda, the whole thing of, like, being there for Charlie. It's like, oh, like Linda being like at the end, like, maybe it is best that you take him to the Silver City, but it's like, no, the fact is you're willing to fight and sacrifice for him means that he's nowhere, he's safer here. We will protect him, you know, because Amenadel was worried about this world and everything, and just like I said, he saw this world as kind of a beautiful thing, but kind of seeing everything play out with Caleb made him go, like, kind of see like the more terrible side of this world, so he wanted to kind of protect his son from that. But obviously knowing that, like, how important it's, like, obviously he couldn't do that to Linda. He thought about it, but it's like, no, like, after what Linda had said, you know, the thing of, like, we can do this, you know, together, like, raising him like that, you know. So, and then you have, like, Maze and Eve, you know, Eve leaving because for her, she's got to find out who she is. Like, she realizes how Maze feels about her, but it's kind of like, I'm still, once again, that whole thing on, I'm still trying to be someone else for other people, so I got to figure myself out, so I'm going to go out and figure that out, you know, which kind of sad. Still opens the window for potentially her in the future, her and Maze. To be fair, that doesn't mean, like, Eva's going to stay going forever. It'd be kind of neat to kind of have her be, like, a recurring character, you know, potentially. I think that'd be pretty neat. And it's like, because you also, it's like, yeah, you want Maze to have some happiness too, because it's that sad thing where Eva's like, oh, I mean, Maze was like, you kind of at some point got to realize that someone doesn't feel the same way about you, because obviously she was talking in one way about, like, obviously Eve and Lucifer, like her obsession with Lucifer, but also, like, she was also talking to herself to realize, like, I feel this way about Eve, but Eve doesn't see that or understand that. But on some level, I think Eve did eventually piece it together, but it's the thing of, like, because she was so focused on Lucifer, trying to be that person for Lucifer, that she didn't see what she could have been for Maze. And it's like, I don't really have the right to be with you when I'm still trying to figure myself out. Until I figure that out, we can't potentially figure out what this could potentially be too. So that's something to kind of look for with all of that too. So at the time of me recording this, from what I can see, there has been no official note on whether or not this is getting renewed for a 5th season. But once again, the season's literally been out not even a full 24 hours at the time of me recording this. So, like, obviously a lot of times you have to wait with these Netflix, like, announcements and stuff like that. Some stuff you get to know ahead of time, other stuff you don't. So I really hope it comes back for 5th season, because I love this show. I was so sad to find out it got canceled, but I, you know, thankfully, like, things kind of worked out, and here we are with season 4. So I hope Netflix does continue going forward with this show, because it's so good. Because I'd be so curious to see where they take things going forward next, because there's a whole conversation of, like, will Lucifer stay in hell? Like, I doubt he will, but then, like, when he comes back, how much time will pass? Would it have been months? Will it actually be years? Like, will we do like a year, like a year or years? Will we see Charlie a little bit older, maybe Trixie a little bit older? Like, you know, there's many different outlets they could handle with this whole 5th season, potentially, once again, kind of going into the whole prophecy thing of, like, Lucifer's holding things back for now, but it might be a situation of, I've kind of brought up before, it's kind of my thought of, like, oh, maybe there'd be, like, a new king of hell. To be fair, we know that can't be the case, because no demon can take the position, only an angel can. So not unless there's some other angel that, like, kind of breaks ranks, like one of his siblings kind of breaks rank and tries to take hell from him, so he ends up falling or not necessarily falling. Well, yeah, because I'm curious because obviously heaven's on top, but it's like I'm curious in the grand scheme of things of like when you come to like, does heaven and hell exist above earth? So like if you were to leave hell, would you technically fall to earth? Like if you fell from heaven, you land on earth. Like would that same thing apply? Probably not, because I always think like, you know, hell is beneath earth. That's just always kind of how things kind of depicted as. So I'm just curious like how that would. But regardless, like I wonder, would he get kicked out of hell? Like would the demons overpower him and kick him out? So once again, the whole conversation of potentially Lilith. Once again, it seems like she might be gone, but not existing, but who knows? Also, once again, the whole question of his other siblings. What about the goddess? Will we ever see her return? Most likely not. What about God? Will we ever see him step up? We saw it bits and pieces here and there. There's like the what if episode that was part of the bonus episodes of season 3, but there was also like obviously it's the actor who plays Carlton Lassiter from Psych, when he was God, but he wasn't really God. It was just kind of like an artifact of God's was there that had some divinity in it, and it made it seem like he was God, when in fact he wasn't God. So there's that. I wonder, is that as much as we'll ever get? Who knows? I brought it up before, and I'll bring it up again. The whole aspect of Ella being able to see ghosts. I'd love to see that going forward. Hell, that's another conversation too, because that was something Lucifer and Chloe talked about. Of like, I mean, not necessarily the ghost thing, but like the whole thing of like, oh, we should tell Dan and Ella because we'd have more people on our side. It's like, well, no, because we don't literally have the time to deal with the factors of them trying to process everything too. So potentially in season 5, we see them finding everything out. I'd be so interested to see Ella's reaction, especially if she's kind of gotten back her religion. Like, what would that mean for her? Especially because she had that point of view. Obviously, that was her kind of falling out of religion, but kind of being like, oh, the contradictions about Lucifer in the, you know, Bible and everything like that. But Dan being who he is, like, how would that make him feel about Lucifer? That probably make him a little reluctant to be like, be as hateful towards Lucifer in certain regards, or being so quick to be so mean towards him. You know, I mean, to be fair, Lucifer kind of cracks jokes at him a lot, but he'd probably be kind of like reluctant to kind of say anything now going forward, like, oh, you're the devil. I don't, you know, obviously everyone's going to have their own reaction. Hell, he might even be like, oh, he's dangerous, don't bring him around, Trixie. Kind of like Chloe kind of had her reaction, so I'm sure Dan's would be kind of similar to hers. But I feel like Ella's might be closer to Linda. Hell, for all we know, Ella being who she is, as awesome as she is, she'd probably just end up being like oh no, she kind of end up handling things on her own, she ends up going her own way of how she handles everything. Still. And also another thing that would be interesting too is dealing with her siblings, because so far, like, 2 of her siblings have popped up in the show so far. So that'd be kind of neat to kind of potentially, if they ever do something like that. Because let's not forget, like, Lucifer knows that one of her siblings is a criminal, and that's something that, like, Ella doesn't know about her brother, but Lucifer found that out, and it's like, oh, you're not going to ever let her find out how much of a disappointment you are. You're going to still be her hero in her eyes, so, and kind of reminding him of that, you know? So I wonder if that element will ever kind of pop back up, too. Probably not, but still. Like I was also saying, too, I'd love to have Eve come back more and just be kind of a recurring character, because it'd be interesting to see where her and Maze would be. But to be fair, like, maybe they'd introduce, like, maybe there'd be a recurring character that's an angel. Maybe, like I said, that depends on, like, maybe someone tries to take over hell from Lucifer, or maybe it has something to do with, like, just them on Earth anyway, because now everything's kind of back to the status quo of like, oh yeah, Lucifer's back in hell, like where this all kind of started from, with the fact of him taking his long ass vacation. But still, I'm curious to see what kind of state hell is in, you know, now, like what the big issue was, and him dealing with a lot of demons. I love that whole thing of like, oh yeah, Squee, yeah, everyone, oh, I hate Squee, oh, everyone hates Squee. But especially like the Dromo dude. Was it Dromo or Dromos? Either way, the main dude that had ended up possessing Kinley's body. It's like, yeah, the fact is he made his move now. It makes you wonder, did Lucifer... Because I love Lucifer in the club being like, I will incinerate you. The fact is, I forbade demonic possession. Which is, it does beg the question, because we never found out. Because even Maze didn't know why he forbade that. I guess that just shows maybe on some level because he feels like that's desecrating humans in some shape or form, like why he doesn't like that. Because I guess because he doesn't want them being on Earth kind of causing havoc or something like that. I don't know. Then once again, the whole Ella and Dan thing where they go from here. I think they'd be I think that'd be interesting. Like I said, they'd probably also try and balance and try to keep it secret, especially in Ella's case, because it's like she looks up to Chloe and she probably feels like she's stabbing Chloe in the back, even though it's like Chloe's officially, her and Dan are divorced. They're good. They're on good terms, so she doesn't have to feel weird and bad about it. But still, that add an interesting element of like the whole Trixie thing of like, has Trixie and Ella ever hung out? I don't remember if that's ever been a thing. I feel like I remember her babysitting at one point in time. But part of me wonders, is that just me confusing that in my head with like Amy Garcia from her character in Dexter, because she played the nanny in Dexter. So I wonder, could it be me confusing that? Once again, I am very hopeful that they bring this back for a 5th season, because I'd love to see what they do with it. Because it's another thing too, like I've brought this up before, of like, let's not forget that this is connected to a larger universe, at least comic book wise, because the comic books this is based off a character from the Sandman comic book. So I don't know if they would necessarily pull from anything from that in any shape or form. At this point, I feel like they wouldn't, but I mean, there's still always a possibility. I mean, once again, I'm not familiar with the comic book, so maybe there's stuff they've hinted to or pointed towards that already kind of shows or says that. But to be fair, the whole conversation about this show has always been like, it will stick mainly to Earth. There's not going to be any like bouncing between realms necessarily. Like obviously our little peeks towards hell is about it. So that's why I feel like they probably won't necessarily cross that line. But to be fair, like I said, we're dealing with the whole celestial thing, so they might pull from that stuff. But like I said, I highly doubt it at this point in time. But still, it'd be interesting to see if they did that or not. So. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.